Phakamani Hadebe is our big hitter today. He joins me in the studio now to talk about the leadership of the embattled power utility, Eskom. The institution has come up with a plan to keep the lights on during winter, which is fast approaching. But its financial woes remains a reminder that they are not out of the woods yet. Mr. Hadebe, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me on The Fix.
Good morning, Karina. Thank you so much for inviting us here today.
Now, the big promise, of course, is that load shedding during the winter months will be taken care of. How reliable is that promise, given the fact that you couldn't give us the surety that there won't be any load shedding?
Yeah, we have undertaken a very extensive research and planning. And we are now in a position where we understand the situation much, much better. And the biggest challenge we are facing is unplanned maintenance. Those are the systems or the machines that have been tripping from time to time. So we're going to pay particular attention on that maintenance. Mm-hmm. But over and above that, we're going to bring into fold the new units that have not been operating. Mm. The combination of this will create or will make an environment that is much better for us to deal with the issues of load shedding. Mm-hmm.
Now, we know that maintenance was often neglected under the old regime, and of course some people have not been appointed to actually do that. Given the fact that maintenance is now part of the resuscitation plan, are the necessary contracts in place, are the necessary staff in place to get that maintenance done in a way that doesn't affect the South African public, that doesn't lead to blackouts and to load shedding?
Yes, we have. We have a team, a SWAT team, that is precisely looking into that. We have set aside 49 billion over the next 4 years to deal with that. Mm. But over and above that, we have about 9.5 billion that will deal with new power stations. All that combined will ensure that the trips that we have had previously are something of the past. Mm. But we also have key initiatives that are going to be undertaken to ensure that we achieve that. For example, over the next 2 months, between April and May, there are 2 units that will be coming back. Mm. These 2 units have been out of operation for almost a year. They will give us 1,000 megawatts. Mm. That's the first one. The second one is there are new units that are coming from Medupi and Kusile, Medupi 2 and Medupi 3, that have not been operating. Now they are operating. And they will give us 1,200 megawatts. And again, that's important. Mm. But thirdly, there are other 2 units from the new that will be coming now and in June. Mm. Over and above that, this is winter. It's a cooler period. And during the cooler period, there's this thing they call a vacuum load losses. Mm. That is, when it's too hot, we lose a lot of power. Because it will be cooler, we'll have back about 800 to 1,000 megawatts. That is good. And Koharabasa Unit 2, which has not come back in, will come in back, which gives us 300 megawatts.
But during winter, the demand is also higher for electricity. And we often see communities that can and can't pay connecting illegally. And that puts pressure on the grid. Are you prepared for that? Could that threaten the promise that you made that you were going to have a load shed-free winter?
The threat of illegal is not that much. It's something that we can deal with, having listed some of the things that I've already highlighted. Yeah. Over and above that, remember that we have highlighted that during the course of the year, we're going to keep our planned maintenance at between 5,000 to 6,000 megawatts. Mm. We will then reduce it, especially in May, when there's a high demand for electricity, to about 2,000, 3,000, and increase it. So we have planned for that. However, there are risks that are not within our control. Those risks include, for example, the trippings of more power units. That is a risk that we are quite aware of. There could be some disturbances that might take place, unforeseen. That's another risk that you have to look into. So we have looked at the risk, and we have decided what is the appropriate level that will enable us to ensure that there's electricity in South Africa during winter. If we are able to maintain the maximum, the unplanned maintenance is 9,500, then we are not going to have nothing, no load sharing. But when it's above, and we have the particular dates where it will be roughly above 9,000.
Which dates are those?
For example, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, out of those 26 days that we counted, we're supposed to have load shedding. But the maintenance was very well. We didn't have any new trips. It was below 9,500. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the new power stations, Medupi and Kusile, Medupi 2 and Kusile 2, came in 1,200 megawatts. That's a plus. In fact, we used far less diesel because of that.
Yeah.
So that is what we foresee as we move forward. Over this coming week, so it means out of the 26 days, we've dealt with the first 3.
Yeah.
This coming week has 3 dates that are important. It's Monday, it's Wednesday, and it's Thursday. As we are talking now, our unplanned maintenance is still sitting at 9,500.
Yeah.
And we think it could be managed going forward.
Okay.
But over and above that, we have our reserves, the diesel. The diesel is at the appropriate level, and over and above that, on hydro, the water levels are at the appropriate level. So we have learned, although there are unforeseen circumstances that might take place, but we have learned previously what has happened, and we are prepared, and we have the SWAT team that will deal with issues immediately when they happen.
Okay, I must say your argument for dealing with these matters is pretty convincing in the sense that you are able to actually break it down to dates. You've worked out which power stations are coming on board, and of course we've got new power stations that have been out of action. So there's practical demonstration of some of the progress that you've made. But you have huge problems financially, right? You have a hole of, 150 billion rand. Now, you've been given a loan by the Development Bank, but many people say it's a drop in the ocean. You've been, welcomed by the African Development Bank as well. But what has been the response of the bond market and the creditors when you've gone out to look for investors? Because, of course, the issue of Eskom has an impact on the entire fiscus and the entire economy.
Yeah. This year, we needed to raise an amount of 72 billion rands from the market.
Yeah.
And we've been able to achieve that. I think we're sitting at about 69 billion or so. That shows that the appetite of our paper is improving. It's not yet at the level, Karima, where we should start celebrating, but there is appetite. It is not just in South Africa, it's also global.
Yeah.
But over and above that, when we went into the global market to issue a bond, there was one that was guaranteed by government that was covered by 3 times, 3 times cover. But there was one that was not guaranteed by government. We also have an appetite. I think the main responsibility for the leadership of Eskom is to ensure that we put in a plan that will give comfort to investors that we are in a sustainable manner. And right now, if you are looking at what we got at NESA, is less than what was projected.
Yes.
It gives a whole of 150 billion that you are talking about.
And Treasury?
In Treasury, we were hoping that we'll get 100 billion over 3 years. We got 69 billion over 3 years, although it's 150 billion over the next 10 years. But we are in discussions with government to see how that hole can be managed. That is something that probably in due course the government will articulate what needs to be done. The major thing that we have done, which has remained a challenge at Eskom for some time, is that we have clear control on the financial management side of the business. We've been able to reduce, for example, the cost by about 50 billion.
How did you do that?
We reduced the capex. That is capital expenditure. We reduced the operating expenditure. And over and above that, there was no new appointments that were brought in. But unfortunately, those savings have been eaten up by us using the diesel much, much more, and the money that had to be spent on the maintenance. But for some time, Eskom has been accused that it relies primarily on the tariffs,
yes,
and that we do not do the efforts in reducing the cost side. If we have reduced all those things, and over and above that, we have set ourselves a target of reducing 20 billion, going to 33 billion over the next 4 years. These are things we're going to say. So we are saying to government, this is our role play. That is what we are going to do. Government, could you also play a role in helping us?
Okay, so that is your turnaround plan, your ability to reduce costs. But you've also got a huge problem. You've got over 1,000 disciplinary cases inside Eskom. These are people that are not high profile but played an important part in the state capture project. What has been achieved in getting rid of those people? How many people's disciplinary hearings have been concluded? And more importantly, have you interacted with the law enforcement agencies, for example, the SIU, to get some of the monies back? We see new appointments. Mr. Willie Hofmeyer has been appointed to the Asset Forfeiture Unit. You've worked with him before when you were in Treasury. Talk to us about that 1,000 disciplinary cases and the response of the SIU and the law enforcement agencies.
Okay. We had about 1,049 investigations that had to be undertaken in disciplinary hearing. And out of that number, 300 people have exited. We have finished that. We have done with about 900 of them. That is good, because people tended to concentrate at us looking at the top.
Yeah, the notchings and so on.
The tentacles were going further down. At the top, we have exited 14 executive and senior managers, but we have gone further, like I'm saying, in 1 year, 300. That's a tick of what we have done when you're talking about corporate governance. We can still do better. The second part of, for example, our partnership and working with law enforcement agency has improved dramatically. For example, the SIU is working hand in hand with us. We are meeting almost fortnightly, and they are with our team, the legal team, on a daily basis. And they have identified 13 companies that we think have to pay us back the money. That is the amount of money.
Give me, first of all, the amount of money that you are trying to recoup, and give me the names of some of those 13 companies.
I wouldn't give the names right now, but I will highlight.
It obviously includes McKinsey. It obviously includes
That's a 1 billion
KPMG.
that is already in the pocket.
Okay.
Then you talk trillion, we have 600 million that we are going to court to look for. But out of this 13, the spend, that is just a spend from Eskom, was 75 billion rand.
So you're wanting to recoup 75 billion?
No, you can't. We have to look at the means and ways. Investigations have been done. In that 75 billion that has been spent, there are dubious transactions that entered and payments that were made. And out of these 13 companies, 8 of them are in new build. And we are working with SIU. They are happy about the progress that's been achieved. They themselves have agreed that you have a strong case here. We now have to finalize the whole process with NPD.
When are you going to court? When are you likely going to court?
Unfortunately, it's not me who dictates. What I do is, once there are questions on transactions that have taken place, we do go outside, get external assistance and resources to come and investigate. And we work hand in hand with SIU. Then we give it to SIU, which has to take to NPA. That is their job. But as we are sitting now, we have done the best we could.
Okay, so out of that 75 billion that you're talking about that you need to recoup, what are the chances in terms of the investigations that have been done of recouping that money, or what sum of money are you hoping to bring back to Eskom?
We don't know yet the figure that will be announced. We said with SIU, once again, it's not about recouping 75 billion. 75 billion is the amount that's been spent. But when SIU and my legal team comes to me and say, these are the companies who spent 75 billion. We think this 250 million was not supposed to spend. This 400 million was not supposed to spend. We think we have to go to court. This is the money that will be returned. And by the way, 3 of them, we have had a discussion, and they're willing to talk. And they're willing to whistle blow and say, we are willing to talk as to how these things were done. And that is very, very positive for South Africa.
Mr. Hadebe, thank you so very much. Sorry we're running out of time, but we were getting to the really interesting stuff. People being actually held accountable. You're working with the SIU. I'm sure we'll have you back in this seat for you to give us a progress update. Thank you so very much for joining us. Still ahead on The Fix, we focus on the mushrooming of smaller parties who can could end up as kingmakers in the potential changes of several provincial governments. Don't go anywhere.